It can't rain all the time. Thanks, Eric Draven. Actually, in the 90s, raining was a state of mind, and you know it. It could rain all the time. Right up here, depending on your mood and how much you wanted to mope around in your bedroom. And this soundtrack and this film are perfect for that angsty teenage energy. It's fun to do soundtrack episodes. And I know it's not the right time of year for you to really dig in and get all gothic and dark and brooding. But hey, in the 90s, we could be this way during Christmas if we wanted. We could be this way during spring or on our way to summer. So that's exactly what we're going to do. So it is time to talk about the Crow soundtrack. Let's go.
Things are going to change. I can feel it.
If this going to be that kind of party, I'm going
Waterproof Records. Waterproof Records. Waterproof Records with Jacob Gibbons.
Look at me. I'm sipping out of my Waterproof Records coffee mug like I'm a late night talk show host. I actually had these on my previous store, and I noticed that they were really small. I wanted to get the black inside, but they're really small. I'm wondering if my new store that I have, if maybe they make larger coffee mugs, because I don't know about you, but I drink a metric shit ton of coffee. I'm a coffee fanatic. I love it, and this coffee cup is like... It looks like those photos that they had of Andre the Giant holding like a soda can. That's how I feel when I hold this coffee cup. It's just way too small. So I need to look into some gigantic Waterproof Records coffee cups. But before we're getting into that, of course, I got to tell you about DistroKid. DistroKid, every episode, I know that if you've known me for a long time, this is probably the part of the episode that you hit fast forward. But if this is your first time listening, DistroKid, I can save you 30% off. You're uploading your music for an entire year. So you're writing an album, you're doing an acoustic ballad song, you're in an alt country Nashville band, you're the next John Philip Sousa. Boy, I don't know where I pulled that from, but hey, probably because 4th of July is on the way. What I was going to say is you could upload it on DistroKid and use my code, which is distrokid.com/VIP/waterproof, and save yourself 30% off of that music. So I tell you every time, I want to tell you about it every time. So make sure you're using that, especially if you're uploading music. distrokid.com/VIP/waterproof. Save yourself 30%. You'll be happy about it. I promise. Okay. Now, I've got, for my listeners, I should have gone further. I should have hung up some black lights, maybe had some bats behind me and embraced a super gothic theme for today's episode. But it is right now, as I'm recording, we are sliding out of April into May. It's warming up and you're like, wow, we're going to do The Crow right now. But like I said, it's one of those albums and the film from that time that, hey, it came out. I think it was pretty much, the album came out in March, released March 29th, 1994. March 29th, we were totally fine with getting all dark and brooding. And then the movie released officially on Friday the 13th, May 13th, 1994. So we're coming up on, it's been 31 years here in a couple weeks. I have over here on my monitor the album cover. And another thing that I'm wearing, if you're watching, I do want to share this. I feel like in all my videos lately, I'm wearing these t-shirts, but I can't help it. If you're looking at me right now, I have my Crow t-shirt, but there's one little addition. At the bottom, it says Sheryl Crow. And on the back of the shirt, here, let me see if I can... there it is. If you can read it, it says, "You can't soak up the sun all the time." And this shirt cracks my shit up. I had to wear it for this episode. This is from the t-shirt creator Meth Syndicate. I only have 2 of his shirts, but I keep wearing them in videos because I put them on. I'm like, this is the perfect style for me because it's like a band, but it's funny. And, he's, of course, he's blazed a trail with his shirts, but I've started thinking a lot more about shirts that I make for you guys, that maybe there would be some fun, more comedic takes on the clothes that, the branded shirts that I put out there. Because right now, the ones that I have are all kind of, they're about the feels in the music. And that's what I move forward with. The shirts that I have are, Music Is Everywhere, that has my Soundwave tattoo on it, which I made the shirt first and then I did the tattoo. And then I have Hope is Punk, which is a skull in front of like a flower petals. And that came from a TikTok live like many years ago. The phrase "hope is punk" was like being kicked around. That shirt never really took off. And then I made one that said, I don't want to talk about it. I just want to listen about it. That was the Mazzy Star shirt. And then I have some cool ones for Waterproof Records, the original logo. I have this amazing Lady Love out of Mexico. She did a unique like design with my face on it. And then I have the one that said, I'm not angry, I'm learning, with my goofy face on it. So those have been my shirts that I still have in my store if you've ever wanted to buy any of that kind of stuff. And I don't know, maybe you could write in the comments of the episode like better ideas for brands, or no, not better ideas. You know what I mean? Like what it is that you would want to see, what would be cool. Let me know. Before we dig into the episode, I wanted to talk about a couple things, which is, I do go out and read criticism. And wait. Before you longtime listeners are like, is Jacob about to sit here and go on a rant about criticism? No, I'm not. I read notes and criticism out there. Comments are one thing, but I try to keep my eyes on people commenting on the podcast specifically. I haven't gotten comments on the podcast in a long time. And I just was checking Apple recently, and I saw a negative review. And I wanted to address it real quick because maybe it needs to be part of the preamble of talking on this show. Because what I don't realize is sometimes people are just cruising through and they see an album or a guest and they listen. And one of the criticisms people have for me that don't know me, I've seen it pop up a couple times, is that I make it all about me, that it's very self-centric. And then that's the vibe that they're getting. That's what this critical comment was like, he just makes it about himself. Very boring. He's not getting to the album reviews and makes it about himself. I am here to tell you 100% I make it about myself. I called the show Waterproof Records with Jacob Givens, but I think the goal always, especially the individual album episodes, is it's my experience that I'm sharing with you. I need to maybe say at the top of the show what my goal is, maybe in a quick 2 or 3 sentences, so that new listeners will be like, oh, it's not that he's an egomaniac. I mean, maybe I'm a little vain from time to time, but I created this because I thought it was interesting to talk about my experience consuming, listening to music, new music, old music, my life. That's why I do it. If I was just here and I was like, all right, guys, let's dive in. Today, let's talk about Metallica's Ride the Lightning. It was produced on this date. This was the songs. And I just was a music kind of like fact person or stories. There are so many podcasts that do that are dedicated to giving you all the data, all the information. They want to educate you. The whole goal I hope to do is remind you of times that you were there for, or bring you back in time if you're young. 2, make you laugh. 3, maybe we'll get a little tender and weepy together and reminisce, or maybe I'll have some interesting life perspective in these late 40s that I can share with you that you'll walk away and be like, hey, that was kind of cool. That was kind of helpful. Because I'm definitely going through a lot of awakenings and interesting parts in my life right now of really making more and more connections about who I am. And I think that happens in midlife. I think that you begin to start really assessing like who you are, what you want, what you're about, and try to get rid of all the other nonsense. And I'm definitely doing that with you. You know what I mean? Like, this show is a way for me to find a sense of myself. And if you want to be along for that journey, then awesome. So that's all I wanted to say about that criticism, because I saw it on another thing where this person was kind of, their criticism was like, well, Jacob likes to hear himself talk. I do. Sure, I do. But that's not what the goal was in that interview, in that episode. That was definitely a situation where my guest was not very talkative and I was trying to do my best to pull the interview along. But anyway, I'm not here to admonish or criticize people's criticisms of me. I'm just here to remind you, if you're new or you don't know me at all, I'm going to make it about myself on the individual episodes for sure. Now, as you've noticed, I've had a lot of guests recently. It's been a string of them, and I have more. And now that I am at Lazy Pickle doing the interviews in that studio, more and more artists are seeing that I have a live space, and they're like, hey, yeah, I'm getting a lot more interest in having guests. So frequently I will be doing the interviews in there, but I think it's important every now and then to stop and have this conversation because that's the foundation of the show. It's just kind of you and me hanging out, talking about music together. Well, I'm talking at you, but maybe you're talking at your stereo. Maybe you're talking to yourself in the room. Maybe you're pretending that you're co-hosting the show with me. Maybe you're my Ed McMahon to Johnny Carson. Questlove to Jimmy Fallon, maybe more relatively new reference. I don't know. The Johnny Carson reference is a little old, I guess. All right. You've waited long enough. I've yammered on here for a good portion of the show and haven't even gotten into The Crow. But let's talk about The Crow soundtrack. This movie, like I said, comes out Friday the 13th, 1994. If you look on the internet, it will say it released on May 10th, 1994, but that was the premiere in Santa Monica. The official drop date was Friday the 13th. I know because I went and saw an actual special on MTV that was gearing up the countdown for it. So I was like, oh, it was Friday the 13th. They were excited about that. The Crow is based off of a comic book by writer James O'Barr, and a lot of musical influences came into that comic book. First of all, James O'Barr's favorite band was Joy Division. So there's a lot of Joy Division lyrics in the comic book. There was also lyrics by The Cure. So several of these artists were fans and familiar with the Crow comic books and were interested in the project. So when it was beginning to be turned into a movie, a lot of these artists were really ready to jump in right away. And there were several that we'll talk about that were part of the process before the movie even started filming, when the script is in its earliest forms. But yeah, this movie, it's a classic revenge tale with these gothic, angsty touches. I haven't rewatched it in a long time, but for this episode, I watched some of the clips. I remember seeing it in the theater. It really connected for all of us back then in those teenage years. Nothing better than a tale of love and loss, loving somebody and them dying, heartbreak, just, the agony. I don't know how many movies I saw where it's like two people are in love and then one dies and you leave the theater just like, oh, love, tortured souls. I think now, I watched some clips and I was like, yeah, it's, this formula has been done a lot of times. So probably if you watched it now, it'd be more like a nostalgic thing. John Wick came along and did a great revenge movie over a dog. And I think that was the right move. It was like, let's change the trajectory of what we're revenging for a little bit. Move on to other things, because the whole, there we were happy. And then a gang of criminals came in and took my love away from me. And it's tragic. I think that people have done it so often now that it seems a little trite. But back then, hey, I enjoyed it. I was a fan. I geared up for this movie. I was pumped about this movie, and I was pumped about this soundtrack. 94, you kidding me? This is spring of freshman year in high school. I am girlfriendless at this point in my life. I have no girlfriend. Oh, I had a very serious girlfriend in 8th grade into freshman year, but by this time, my long distance relationship is falling apart, and I don't know what I'm going to do anymore. So I am just full of all the feels and crying and listening to sad music in my room. And so The Crow comes along at a perfect time. But we all knew that Brendan Lee died while making the film. It happened long before the movie releases. Sometime in 93, we find out that he gets killed while filming the film. And it makes national news, and everybody's kind of like, oh no, this is terrible. It was an accident on set. If you don't know this, I'll do the quick recap version for you. Brandon Lee was Bruce Lee's son, and very handsome guy, had the martial arts skills and moves and talents and was starting to build a movie star career for himself. He's cast in this movie, and then a tragic accident, which involved a prop gun that had some junk, not to belabor the point, but they have blanks and then they have hollow bullet rounds, basically an actual bullet where they dig out the projectile, because when they want to do close-up shots of the gun, a real shell coming out of it looks more authentic. So if they want to do that, and on this production, they had to cut corners and they had not professional people doing the hollow rounds. And so they had those, and one of the guns for a sequence, it has this little shrapnel in it still in the chamber, and they load it with the blanks. And if you fire a blank, it fires at Brandon Lee. It hits him in the abdomen, and it's the thing that kills him. And he's killed while performing this stunt during The Crow. It's all over the news. It's so tragic. But in a lot of ways, I know it's terrible to say, it made the movie so much more popular because of that aspect. Knowing that it was this tragedy, and it was almost like, oh, well, we got to go see it now. And not to be too morbid, but I remember sitting there with friends, and every frame, somebody else had a prediction on. That was the frame. That was the moment. He died right there. And that was like a weird, twisted obsession. I don't know about you, but I remember my friend groups looking at different scenes and being like, no, this is the moment. No, this is the actual moment that it really happened. Like, this is it. As if they would put somebody's real death on screen. But that was what drove some of the excitement. The promotion and marketing this film had that dark energy around it. And we're moving into spring of 1994, where a lot of tragedy is going to be hitting us at once. You know, the year before we lose Brandon Lee, and then in April of 1994, Kurt Cobain kills himself. Right around this time, I think it's in March, John Candy dies. I know that John Candy, you might be like, well, it's not really the same universe, but it is, in that here's this star of John Hughes films, beloved, cherished person who passes away too soon. Kurt Cobain, this is shocking. This sends shockwaves throughout the world and music world, and all of us teenagers are heartbroken over that. So it's just, everything's gotten so morbid all of a sudden. And I know that some of us run toward morbidity and kind of darkness, and others run away from it. And I am somebody who tends to find solace and comfort in darkness. I like the darker side of things. I haven't gone through life, wearing mascara, eyeliner, and painting my fingernails black and dressing up like the Crow, but I definitely have that sentiment in my heart. I definitely have that brooding person who likes to listen and just revel in those dark feelings inside, like so many of us do. Oh, hey, my Zoltar machine just lit up. I hope it's not making a sound. I think it's making some sound. I have a Zoltar machine behind me now. Isn't that cool? But let's get to some of the songs on this soundtrack. Starting off right away, The Cure, Burn. You will be excited to know that this song was like absolutely last minute by Robert Smith and drummer Boris Williams. And originally, Robert Smith was going to put The Hanging Garden off of Pornography, which is one of my favorite songs on that album. I absolutely love The Hanging Garden. My other favorite on that album is Charlotte Sometimes, but that's besides the point. But I love The Hanging Garden. It was going to be in the film because in the comic book, there are lyrics from the song in the comic book. So that was originally the idea, but Robert Smith wanted to write something specifically for the soundtrack. And in 2 days, they whip up, him and Boris, they whip up Burn. And I would say, damn, not too shabby for 2 days, Robert Smith. I mean, of course, we know he's ridiculously talented, but this is a really great song. And when I finally saw The Cure live with my brother in 2023, they played this at Riot Fest, and I was so excited to hear the kind of the squealing bird sounds at the beginning, or whatever that is. It's like, it's coming with those drums, and that's Burn. And it really does start off the tone and the feeling of the Crow soundtrack perfectly, right? Okay. Then we get to track 2, which is Machines of Loving Grace with Golgotha Tenement Blues. Now, I wouldn't say Machines of Loving Grace were that big At the time, to most people, they were an Arizona industrial band. There was definitely several of their songs that, if you knew people that were into that style of music, that they were familiar with the Machines of Loving Grace. But I wasn't well versed in them at all. But this song, they had a copy of the script a year before it even filmed. And so they were very much involved in the project from the get-go. And so they wrote their song specifically to fit the vibe of the film. They knew what it was going to be, what the kind of style was. So they had, knowing the story, the kind of style they wrote. And what they came up with was Golgotha Tenement Blues. And again, it's nice and kind of skulking, dark, really has this, it fits. You could play that song over footage from the film as a trailer, and you'd be like, yeah, it's sinister, lurking kind of energy. And they also said it's, to their fans, it's very different from the other stuff they were writing at the time because they did craft it specifically for this movie. So, Machines of Loving Grace, Golgotha Tenement Blues. Stone Temple Pilots, Big Empty. Huge hit for this band. Huge. Literally becomes not only the single version, but of course they had a Big Empty from their Stone Temple Pilots Unplugged that becomes also very popular. So these guys put this on the soundtrack, but it isn't their initial choice for the soundtrack. When they're originally approached to put some music on the Crow soundtrack, they have a song that they've written called Only Dying. And the song Only Dying actually dates back to the very early days of the band when they're just starting out together, starting to write songs, and they're recording some stuff in a North Hollywood studio. And this song is kind of mocking the death of someone, mocking death in a way. And it's not really polished. It's kind of a rougher demo that they've got. Robert DeLeo has said, I don't know, I was listening to way too much of The Cure then because the guitar tone on it, it's just not quite dialed in to the STP sound. But I know that Weiland had always wanted to go back into the studio and record a cleaner version of Only Dying, but I don't think it ever happened. But that was the original song that they wanted to provide. But once Brandon Lee died, they decided, that's not the right vibe to put on this soundtrack. That's just not the right, we don't want to be doing that on this. We want to be a little bit more respectful of his death. So they switched it over to Big Empty, and there you go. I mean, Big Empty, huge STP hit. All right, Nine Inch Nails. I mean, just the sheer sound and look and feel of the Crow alone. You hear an artist like Trent Reznor and Nine Inch Nails, and you go, well, of course, that band and he would be included on the soundtrack. And you'd be right, because he was a fan of the comic books. Trent Reznor has always been somebody who has come out and talked about he liked reading comic books and graphic novels. So he enjoyed this a lot, and he was being asked, would you like to provide a song for the soundtrack? And he ends up choosing to do a Joy Division song. He does Dead Souls. Peter Hook came forward and said a few years ago, he said, originally the producers of the film, I'm assuming, Graham Revell and people working on the film, they approached Peter Hook and said, we'd really like you to record Joy Division's Love Will Tear Us Apart with the members of New Order that you're playing with now. And New Order, you guys do a new version of Love Will Tear Us Apart, and that'll be on the soundtrack. And that was the original plan. But apparently it didn't come together. It didn't happen, and they weren't on the soundtrack. But they went to Trent Reznor. He decided, hey, I'm going to do Joy Division because this song, these lyrics appear so much in the comics, and the author loves Joy Division, so I'm going to tackle it. I think he was a little intimidated to do it, but he did such a faithful cover of the song that Peter Hook said, you know what, we approve. It's very faithful to the original. It's one of those covers that you go, it's very respectful. You can tell he appreciates what we did. And so they signed off on it and said it was great. It was the first song that Trent Reznor bought the Sharon Tate house where he recorded Downward Spiral. This song is the first song he records in that house. So, gives you the chills. And now we arrive to Rage Against the Machine, Darkness, which this song dates back to before Rage Against the Machine is together in Zach De La Rocha's first band, Inside Out. And he had performed this. The original song title was known as Darkness of Greed, but he decided once his band, Inside Out, starts splitting up, the next album that they're going to put out at the time, Inside Out, that is, their next album is going to be called Rage Against the Machine. But that band breaks apart. One of the members becomes a Hare Krishna monk. And then Zach is forming this new band. And what's he going to call it? What Inside Out's next album is going to be called? Rage Against the Machine. And here comes this song, Darkness. And it's got this nice little groovy bass line. And then it breaks into the heavy chorus, and then it's got that crazy Tom Morello soloing of noise. So this really falls in line with that debut album. Darkness sounded like it easily could have been on the self-titled first album. It matches in all styles. I would say that the only reason it probably got left off is they had written all these others, and this was like a cut that came from a perspective, pre-Rage. It's from Zach De La Rocha, and it went through different iterations. But it just sounds a little bit like they found what that song was and made it even better for their debut album. But this is a great song. This is a classic Rage Against the Machine sound. And again, when you get to the solo part, I'm like, yep, there's that crazy experimental soloing Tom Morello in there. And then we arrive on Violent Femmes. And if you're buying the soundtrack and listening to it for the first time, you're looking down and you're like, okay, we had the Stone Temple Pilots bringing a different touch to these other darker, industrial, heavy songs that were experimenting with these covers that are making this brooding Crow movie. And then along comes Violent Femmes. So you're like, okay, they're known for up-tempo, acoustic, kind of poppy, fun songs. And then all of a sudden they get kind of more brooding. And this is a very kind of film noir vibey song. You kind of hands in your pockets walking along, and it's raining. Of course it's raining, because it rains all the time, despite what Eric Draven says. It can rain all the time. And that's what you do when you put on the Crow soundtrack, is you let it rain all the time. But like I said, Violent Femmes, not known for this sound. This song was initially part of the sessions for their album Why Do the Birds Sing in 93. And the band was like, when they laid it down, it was like, we're absolutely not putting this on the record. It's got synth in it. It's slower. It just doesn't match that up-tempo vibe that the Violent Femmes are known for. So it finds its home on the Crow soundtrack for Color Me Once. And we arrive to Henry Rollins, Mr. Henry Rollins, bringing his take on Suicide's Ghost Rider. Now, again, I didn't even mention this before, but when you bought the soundtrack, there were many of these that I wasn't aware were covers, and this is one of them. And you might be like, Jacob, why didn't you grab your liner notes and see who wrote everything on every song? And I'd be like, because I didn't. Because you listen to an album and you just go like, that song was fucking great. Who did it? Henry Rollins. Yeah, it was great. And then somebody later would come up to you and be like, oh, did you know Ghost Rider is by the band Suicide? And you'd be like, oh, well, no, I didn't know that, because that song came out in 1977, 1 year before I was born, and I'm not that cool, and I don't know about the synth duo Suicide yet. I don't know about them. So I just know that Henry Rollins is doing this really cool cover of it, and Ghost Rider is a Marvel comic book that I've bought before, so that's all I know. But now I'm here to teach you, so you don't have to fall down the mistakes that I made, which is I didn't know these songs were covers. And the thing is that Henry Rollins didn't cover this song because he was a fan of the comic book or Ghost Rider. He was a huge fan of the band Suicide. They was very, very influential for him, and he had a close relationship with member Alan Vega, and even, I believe, spoke at his funeral when he passed away many years later. But Henry Rollins loved this band and wanted to do a cover of Ghost Rider. And boy, when you hear the two side by side, they're very different from each other. The Suicide version is synth, and it's up-tempo, and it's fast, and it's moving. And it really, even the babies that are said in that are just rapid fire compared to how Henry Rollins just takes this thing down, draws it out to this sludgy, heavy Jim Morrison from the Doors kind of like just booming voice. And it's just very different take, an awesome take, fits the Crow soundtrack very well. But it is one of those things that Henry Rollins did it because he loved Suicide so much. He didn't know anything about the Ghost Rider character other than the way that he looked. And then Helmet, Milquetoast. There are two versions of this song. One is M-I-L-K. The other one is M-I-L-Q-U-E. And the one on this soundtrack is spelled M-I-L-K. And really the songs are very similar to each other. There's just a few changes on each. I adore the band Helmet, and I actually just saw them for the 30th anniversary tour of Betty where they played this song. And when this song happened, I got so excited. And as I'm looking up on stage and Paige Hamilton is like kicks in and it jumps right in. And then all of a sudden everything drops down. It's just the bass going with the drums before he starts singing. And I'm like, God, that's such a badass part of that song. It wasn't his idea to do that. It was Mr. Butch Vig's idea to do that. He was working to help him put this song, produce this song together, and it was his idea to say, why don't you let the guitars drop out in that section right there because it adds more dynamics. And then Butch Vig adds a little bit of that kind of vocal effect on Paige's voice there at the beginning. It kind of sounds trebly and distant, like it's like poorly recorded AM radio sounds. And he adds that touch, has the guitars drop out. And Paige Hamilton has said, like, we were Helmet and we weren't quite sure about going down this road working with guys like Butch Vig because he was part of the whole Nirvana thing and we weren't the Nirvana thing. And if there's anything that Helmet was, it was just in your face riffs all the time with those drums. And so this touch of dynamics really does add a cool element to one of their songs that I think, came from Butch Vig's input of trying those dynamics. And it really does make this version stand out so much. And I love that about it. But it's also on Betty, but it was on this, I believe, first. And Milquetoast by Helmet. The only difference between the two of them is that there's some sounds and different things and the way that they end the song, fading out rather than just kind of a hard stop. I had mentioned earlier about songs on the album that I didn't know were covers. I did sadly not know that the Dead Souls, 9 Inch Nails, that was Joy Division. I know. Shame on me. I wasn't really well versed on Joy Division as a young kid. My brother probably had a better idea about what they had put out. I think I knew Love Will Tear Us Apart because it was played on a lot of the college radio stations, but I just wasn't that well versed in my Joy Division. And I wouldn't know until years later that was their song. Because for me at the time, it sounded like just another great 9 Inch Nails song. But again, I'm here to save you the embarrassment because the next song that we're going to do is yet another cover. The song The Badge by Pantera. This was a cover of a hardcore punk band called Poison Idea, a punk band out of Oregon. And Pantera, Phil Anselmo, was hugely influenced by that band. He was writing so much music at the time through that lens of what Poison Idea was doing. He had cited other bands like Black Flag and Agnostic Front, but he said specifically that Poison Idea really inspired him in Far Beyond Driven in the album and specifically in this song. And really, when I heard this, it has that, the one identifiable thing is, of course, Phil Anselmo's voice is very different than like a hardcore voice. It's much more in the metal sphere of things. But the guitar tone, I can only describe Pantera's guitar tone as if you were to take distortion and then put it through a tube, and it's like through some kind of centrifuge just being like shot through this tube, because it has this kind of barrel echoey sound to it. And when you listen to Poison Idea's version of it, it's just this nice crunchy guitar for this hardcore song. And then as soon as you get to Pantera's version, it just goes, you know what I mean? I don't know. Somebody who works in sonics and recording will probably say like, that's called this. I don't know what it's called, but that's what it feels like to me. All right, then we get to For Love, Not Lisa, Slip, Slide, Melting. This band is an Oklahoma City, Oklahoma band. And this was a big opportunity for them. I don't think they had any major attention at the time. Oklahoma, not a lot of bands were coming out. But this is a kick-ass song. It's a great opening riff. It's a real good rocker and hometown pride. And they were almost not that excited about being on the soundtrack because back then, before the whole Brandon Lee controversy, it just was like, oh, I don't know if this is just going to be like a kung fu movie. Is this just going to be like some dumb throwaway thing that nobody cares about? But then they get shown like images and what the style and the look, the storyboards of the movie. And they're like, oh shit, this might be amazing. And they accept being a part of this soundtrack and they provide Slip, Slide, Melting. And you know, it's a great addition to the soundtrack. And these guys, I don't think they had much of other opportunities after this. They had a few other things and tours and songs in the 90s and releases. But I was just looking up this band to see what had been going on. And hey, for what it's worth, I want to give them a shout out because they're Oklahomies. The lead singer of For Love, Not Lisa, he is starting a new band called 10 Killer. And it's like alt country kind of stuff. And he's just getting it off the ground. So if you want to go, if that's your jam, if you want to listen to stuff like that, you should go check it out. I haven't even had a chance to check it out yet. I just saw his video saying, hey, I was in For Love, Not Lisa, and I'm starting this new project. So go support it. So here's to you, sir. I hope that I can send some listeners your way that like that kind of stuff. I love the name 10 Killer. That comes from a lake in Oklahoma, 10 Killer Lake. That's the story behind that. So us Oklahomans, we know, man, we know. But this song, I didn't know if there was anything else that I could really tell you about it other than they almost did make it on it. But I think that they're really glad they did because it, put For Love, Not Lisa on the Crow map. Then we get to My Life with the Thrill Kill Cult, one of those big industrial, it even says in the description of them, it says industrial disco sleaze rock band, which I think that's such a great definition of this band. Definitely sleaze. I remember there was aspects of the Thrill Kill Cult. I don't know when this was, but I remember they had a lot of like controversy surrounding them for depicting sexual acts on stage, blasphemy, things like that. I just remember that people got really, got their panties in a bunch over Thrill Kill Cult back in the day, the song After the Flesh. But the story about this is that they just had to film, they're in the movie, the band is playing in the movie in one of those like nightclub scenes where people are shirtless, it's very industrial, and they're on stage, and apparently it was freezing cold while they filmed that in the movie, and all the actors, they had to do it over 2 days, and it was just hours and hours and hours on end of them having to catch this like crazy party, because industrial, I was never hugely into industrial music. You think of like Ministry, you think of like Skinny Puppy, and there's dozens more. Industrial had this machine, like obviously machine, but vampiric and gothic as well. It was almost like a robot vampires music, because you go listen to gothic music or even like, okay, so I just recently went and saw Chaos and Carnage tour, and two of the bands that night, one was Flesh God Apocalypse and the other one's Cradle of Filth, which has been around forever. And those were such vampiric sounding acts. Flesh God is heavy, but they've got that operatic female singer, so it's like Phantom of the Opera with metal. Then you get to Cradle of Filth, which is screeching, like I can't even do justice to that sound of that vocal style. But there's something very like scaling the walls like a gargoyle, leaning over when you listen to that stuff. And it's very vampiric, very monstrous. And then you get to industrial, and it's got this sinister underbelly world feel, but those fast guitars in there and the machine-like sounding to it all, the synth of it all, gives it this kind of steampunk cyborgy type thing. I don't know how to explain it, but that's how I think of industrial. And there have been songs that have leaked to me over time that I've enjoyed, like Jesus Built My Hot Rod or whatever. But overall, it's not a music scene that I really got that into. Here we go. Jesus and Mary Chain's Snake Driver. Now, these guys wrote this song for the soundtrack. They released it before the soundtrack came out on a collection of songs. So I thought it was kind of funny because I was like, well, that's kind of a dick move. You wrote a song for a soundtrack and then you ended up putting it out before it ended up on the film soundtrack. But whatever, Jesus and Mary Chain can do whatever they want to do. But I want to tell you something about this song. This song holds up. I was playing the Crow soundtrack in my car, and when I got to Snake Driver, this is like bop your head, sunglasses on, windows down. I was just cruising, and I was like, this is a bop. This is a great, great song. So if you want to go listen to this whole soundtrack, because, starting from the beginning, like I said, Gothic vibes, haunting vibes, dark, sinister vibes. But when I got to Snake Driver, I was just like, hell yeah. Something about it. I was like, this really is a song separate from the soundtrack that I could put on anytime because I thought it was so great. Jesus and Mary Chain, great band. We're coming near the end of the soundtrack, and I feel like I've been talking for a while because I hogged up the beginning with me talking about that other stuff. But then we get to Medicine, Time Baby 3. So Medicine, this kind of shoegazy band, they had several versions of this song. They had Time Baby, and then Time Baby 2 and Time Baby 3. Time Baby 1, the first one, just Time Baby, was like a demo version. It runs several minutes longer than the other two. The song played in the film is Time Baby 2, and then the one on the soundtrack is Time Baby 3. On this one, it features the Cocteau Twins, Elizabeth Fraser, and then of course Robin Guthrie helped as well from the Cocteau Twins to help arrange and do some elements to it as well. But it's got a different feel than Time Baby 2 and the original Time Baby because of those touches. And you can absolutely hear Elizabeth coming in there, her voice, it's unmistakable every time she adds her voice to a project. And you're like, there she is. There's that very specific Fraser phrasing, the way that she kind of lilts her way through a piece of music. I thought this was interesting, though. One of the members of Medicine, so years later, in the year 2003, he brought Medicine back after a long hiatus, and it was just him, and he partnered up with Shannon Lee, Bruce Lee's daughter, and they partnered up for that iteration of Medicine. And I thought, how interesting, because Medicine, Time Baby 3, here we are doing a song for The Crow, a film that has Brandon Lee on it, who dies, Bruce Lee's son. And then the only other sibling of Brandon Lee and Bruce Lee's daughter, Shannon Lee, ends up partnering with somebody who worked on the soundtrack. So there was a nice little thing of another way that the Lee family was getting more and more continuing on from this time, a connection from Brandon to Shannon Lee and the music. Anyway, I thought it was kind of nice. I thought it was an interesting thing. And then we get to the very last song on the album. Whenever you do something, gothy and dark, you gotta finish strong with the very sad song that apparently in the film, remember, It Can't Rain All the Time, was supposed to be like our main character, Eric Draven. That was his song that he wrote in the film. But on the soundtrack, it's performed by Jane Siberry. And it's pretty. It's a pretty song. I can't say that I was at the time pausing too much for this piece of music. She does a beautiful little sing-songy thing to it as well. And then when it does that kind of high note thing there, it sounds fragile. It sounds like somebody who's kind of fragile and breaking. So it's touching. And I listened to it. I listened to it recently and I was like, oh, this is a nice little song. But it was one of those things that, hey, blame it on my teenage angst and testosterone was surging through my teenage veins. And I was like, all right, skip. Wanted to get back to more Burn by The Cure or, Dead Souls by Nine Inch Nails. But Dead Souls by Joy Division via Nine Inch Nails. But this song, this is in the movie, and it was, some of the composing elements were by Graham Revell, who helped put together the score for this film, and this would really lead him on to scoring a bunch of other things like From Dusk Till Dawn, Sin City. And then he assisted Evanescence with the string arrangements on their debut album, Fallen. So that was kind of cool about Graham. But yeah, Graham had a history as a artist in the electronic noise group SPK. And so they did all sorts of crazy things on stage, like destroying stuff, breaking things, and slamming metal. So he had that avant-garde, experimental, industrial, robot vampires history in his blood. And he knew that this is what he wanted to do. He knew the kind of the feel that was the Crow soundtrack. And I didn't get into the Crow 2 soundtrack, which is also good. I am going to confess right now that I never saw the Crow 2. Comes out in 96, and by then I'm like, the hype was gone for me by that time. But saw the Crow, the first movie, loved the soundtrack. Crow 2 soundtrack, I've heard the soundtrack. It's got some great songs on it as well, and maybe I'll cover it at some point in time. But for the most part, this was my view into the Crow. And since then, I think there's been a couple remakes and rebrands. I think in the early 2000s, I feel like they tried to do it again. And then just recently, there was that one last year that they tried to completely relaunch it. I didn't see it. I don't know if you saw it, if it's any good. It's got that guy who's a good actor who plays It, Skarsgård. There's a lot of those guys. But I never saw it. But this was a moment in time. It was perfectly timed. A lot of us teenagers were thinking a lot about death and mortality, and Brandon Lee died, and Kurt Cobain died, and John Candy died, and people are dropping like flies, and maybe I won't live forever. And if anybody ever killed a girl I loved, I'd seek out revenge. That's what most of us thought back then. We thought I would fight. I would fight to avenge my love's death. Something so fun about brooding, right? For those of us who sat there and moped into our sad feelings. I still do it. To this day, still like to sit in my sad feelings. But that was the Crow. It was the Crow soundtrack. March 29th, 1994. Brings back a lot of memories. I should probably do a video about the Crow soundtrack. I had done one ages ago, but it's time to maybe bring it back. But okay. I don't think I have anything else that I wanted to cover other than I love my shirt. Oh, one funnier thing that I'll say about my t-shirt that says Sheryl Crow on it. I wore it in one video that I did with this guy called John the Dad on Instagram. We did a collaboration, and we were doing stank faces for all these songs. He pitched me the idea because it was his video series. And the goal was like when the riff kicks in, we make the stank face. And so I was like, I'm going to wear this t-shirt. And it cracked me up because somebody in the comments was like, I can't believe that anybody wearing a Sheryl Crow shirt would listen to this kind of music. It was like kind of somebody kind of being like, if you're wearing a Sheryl Crow shirt, why would you be reacting to Rage Against the Machine? And I was like, you can see it says it's the Crow logo, right? You can see it's a parody shirt. But anyway, I thought it was pretty funny. Oh, the internet, full of such interesting, fascinating creatures. Somebody's going to come on here and be like, oh, he talks about himself too much. I do talk about myself too much, but you like it. That's why you're here. I don't know. Let's wrap things up. Thank you so much. I talked a little bit up top about my shop, about my store. I do have a store that is now dashery through TeePublic. It's a new kind of thing. I don't know. I'm trying to have some sales in there, dream up some new shirts and ideas. I should be talking about it more, and I never do. But hey, if you want to go pick up some merch, there's some stuff out there. But let's maybe figure out a new chapter of stuff that I can put out there. And then also, please go comment on my Apple Podcasts. And, that one guy thought this was boring and I talk about me too much. And if you want to say the same thing, then go for it. But please don't. Go out there and say something nice. Say something good. Say, I like hearing about Jacob. But I can't make this show without you, so I sure do hope you're sharing it with friends and telling people about subscribing to Waterproof Records. I do have such a great time, and I have some very exciting guests coming. Holy shit, do I have some great guests coming. The next episode, I'm very excited about that episode. It's such a cool group of people, and I am excited about it. And then I've already have people in my messages and my emails that are going to be scheduled to be the next guest that you'll know. Trust me, you'll know some of these people coming on the show. And there's going to be that nice balance between new artists, like I had Military Gun, I had the Dooms, I had Kevin Martin from Candlebox. And I'm going to constantly bounce back and forth between artists that we grew up with and the legends along the way to newer bands that I'm getting to meet and talk to and that are out there on the road and getting after it now. I think that's going to be what makes this show fun, as we just kind of embrace the whole spirit of rock and roll, baby. But I can't do it again without Pantheon Podcast. Pantheon has made me part of their huge network of music podcasts, and I hope that you are checking out some of their other shows. But I'm glad that of all their shows, you're checking out mine, and I am grateful to be a part of their network. And lastly, make sure to use that distrokid.com/VIP/waterproof to get 30% off your first year of uploading your music. Thanks so much for joining me on Waterproof Records. This has been fun to talk about the Crow soundtrack, and I hope you will keep up with the show, see who's coming next, and stay with me because I love having you here, and I'll see you next time. Bye.
Things are gonna change. I can feel it.
If this gonna be that kind of party, I'm gonna